You're listening to Achtung, Millwall, broadcasting from the beautiful South Bermondsey. Accept no substitute.
Hello dear listeners, welcome to Achtung Millwall. This is a preview show, a bit of a hodgepodge preview show for the trip to Preston on October the 21st. But ahead of any of today's content, as you all well know, this season, Achtung Millwall has teamed up with Pundit Games, number one football trivia game. Beautiful ball game, well worth investing for Christmas presents, birthdays, anything really. It's a really nice game. You score goals against your opponent by answering a series of football-related questions, a wide range of genres and subject matters. Today's question, I'm going to just give you a little taster with, is from the England, the Premier League, England in the 2010s, as they put it on the game, Premier League 2010s. But it's a good game. As I say, you play it for 45 minutes each way, or 45 minutes if you like, however long you want to. Answer a series of questions, score a goal, and whoever's got the most goals wins at the end of the end of the game. And so you demonstrate your football knowledge to your peers, your loved ones, and family. So today's taster question: punditgames.co.uk. This curly-haired Argentinian flourished when he was given the Newcastle captaincy in 2011-12, guiding the Toon Army to a surprise fifth-place finish in the Premier League that season. His performances earned him a spot in the PFA Premier League Team of the Year just 2 seasons after making the PFA Championship Team of the Year. So this is a Newcastle defender from 2011-12, playing alongside, this is their Team of the Year, PFA Team of the Year, Joe Hart in goal for the PFA, alongside Vincent Kompany, Mr. X, Kyle Walker, Leighton Baines, Yaya Toure, Scott Parker, David Silva, Robin Van Persie, Gareth Bale and Wayne Rooney. So that will be the PFA Team of the Year 2011-12. A curly-haired Argentine who captained Newcastle in 2011-12, guiding them to a surprise 5th place. We'll have the answer to that question at the end of today's show. Now then, dear listeners, as we've said already, Millwall travel to Preston on the 21st of October. Early kick-off. It's on Sky TV. Don't miss it. I've got a train ticket up there. I had a train ticket lined up from previous, before they moved the kick-off time. So I'm still weighing up whether to go up there or not. It is on Sky TV Live. I'll probably go, knowing me, because I'm potty. But I thought, as a little hors d'oeuvre, a little taster, a little, amuse-bouche for you all, we'd do a preview show looking back into the past at previous Preston fixture, and I found weren't that many, in all honesty. In recent times, yes. Historically speaking, no, we didn't play Preston terribly often in the early days of the club's existence. I have found, I found one fixture, the Preston away win at Deepdale in 1928, but my eye also fell upon a second fixture, which was a rare meeting of Millwall and Preston North End, actually on the Isle of Dogs, North Greenwich ground. This was in the famous Cup run of 1903, dear listeners. This was a meeting of Millwall and Preston in the second round proper of the 1902-1903 FA Cup. This was a famous Cup run. Millwall Athletic made it all the way to the semi-finals in 1903, being beaten in the semis by Derby County, just short of the final, obviously. But this was a huge cup run. It was a very, very important cup run because it came on the back of an incident where we've mentioned this a few times on these history shows that we've done over the years, Neil and I. This was the almost, the going out of existence of Millwall in 1901. The club were evicted from their ground at the Athletic Ground, which is now the Asda on the Isle of Dogs. But we were evicted from the ground and we struggled for our very existence in the aftermath of being evicted from the ground by the dock companies that largely ran the show on the Isle of Dogs. So by the skin of our teeth, we'd managed to preserve the club's existence. A ground had been arranged at very short notice at what is now Millwall Park, then known as North Greenwich. And I think, as the Lions of the South puts it, quite eloquently by James Murray, that Mill still existed, defied the odds of a bad farthing at the Bank of England. It was a great expression. I've never heard that one before. But basically, we were lucky still to be in existence. So a cup run came as a very, very welcome boost for Millwall Athletic. And this game was a second round proper. We'd already beaten Luton Town 3-0 in the first round of the FA Cup. That was in early February. Second round was played on the 21st of February. And this was actually the famous victory, a 4-1 win over Preston North End at North Greenwich. Now, I do have a press report here for you, listeners, as I got slightly sidetracked, as you do when you do this kind of stuff. My original focus was on the 1928 fixture, which we will come back to later on. I'm going to give you a double header. We're going to give you a twos up, a fixture in 1903 and then a fixture in 1928. But first up, we, as I say, got focused on this game and played in early 21st of Feb 1903. And I found a match report, beautifully written match report, in a paper called The Morning Leader, which was dated the 23rd of February. Headline, big headline, about the English Cup. The FA Cup was often called the English Cup back in those times, strange as it might sound. Subheadline, Spurs and Millwall victorious, the Blades lose to Bury, and then the match report from Millwall, Leo rampant. Now, what is interesting is that many people have asked, when did the nickname the Lions start to come to pass? And the club at that point were sub-nicknames. We were known as the Dockers. That was the lead nickname, if you want to put it that way, at that time, but also become known through these cup runs as the Lions of the South. And this is a very erudite play on that idea of being Lions of the South by saying Leo the Lion. Leo rampant, Preston North End, well beaten at Millwall. I'm going to read some of this match report. It's just fantastically written. I'm going to try and revive this style in my podcast. If it loses listeners, I don't give a shit. But I do like this tone that their unnamed reporter, actually, don't give any kind of byline for this report. So yeah, Preston North End well beaten at Millwall. The superior person of football may turn his nose up and sneer that after all it was not a clever nor scientific exhibition of the finer points of the game. Well, perhaps it wasn't. Millwall never could, and probably never will, play drawing room football. Their game is to prevent the other fellows from playing it. When it is their day out, the other fellows must look for trouble. And unfortunately for Preston North End, Saturday was very much the start of such a day for the Dockers. Almost from the start and right to the finish, the Dockers gaily overran the one-time invincible Preston, who were never allowed any room. So closely did Hulse and co stick to them. And if it wasn't a game crammed with the niceties of football, it was a fine cup tie to watch. The pace was hot. And with Millwall going as well and strong at the end as they were at the beginning, Mr. George Saunders, who was the first manager of Millwall Football Club, and what we would term manager, and famous name, Bob Hunter, may congratulate themselves that their 10 days spent in Rochford, that's Rochford Southend, were not spent in vain. That is a reference to the fact that the club had prepared for this particular game by taking the squad away to Southend, Rochford, the Ship Inn, in actual fact, in Rochford, as by means of a preparation for these huge cup ties. A crowd of 11,000 turned out for this particular win. It was a 4-1 win over Preston. Millwall going 3-0 up inside the first half. The match report actually expresses two disappointments. The reporter was disappointed that we didn't get 20,000 into the North Greenwich ground. There was 11,000 in the event. That references from the Lions of the South report. The massacre, as they call it, was witnessed by 11,000. When the morning leader is disappointed we didn't get 20, and he puts that down to the conclusion that the price of the admission had been raised by the Millwall board. There is nothing new in this life, dear listeners. Millwall raised the price to get into the ground, and the crowd was half of what was expected. There's nothing new, as I keep saying to you. This is a matter for the club's rulers, says the journalist, and if they are satisfied with the gate returns, it is of no concern to the man in the street. But speaking for myself, I did not like the comparatively empty stands. The huge banks at each end of the ground, the terracing, were pictures from man stood to man in one unbroken mass. So the cheap areas were packed. The more expensive stands were less so. The match report in the Lions of the South describes the action as the massacre. As we've said, only McBride, Preston's goalkeeper, only he saved his side from total embarrassment. He kept the Lions out for 20 minutes before Moran scored for Millwall. Then Gettins and Hulse made it 3-0 by half-time. Jones cracked home a fourth, and in the dying stages, Preston pulled back a consolation goal. That was an emphatic, if not shock victory, says Lions of the South, which put Mill back on the footballing map. The referee newspaper gave this glowing summary. This is quoted in Lions of the South. And the referee paper said, Millwall is still a power in the land and for the time being a decided factor in connection of the Cup. As any survivors will readily grant if they have it in mind to visit the Docks District, Sutcliffe and Co. soon convinced them of that fact. The Millwall ground is not exactly the kind a spirit level would consider a place of ease and quiet. The ridges and furrows do not want pointing out, they tell their tale too plainly. A visiting team, no matter its capacity, will never find the Millwall enclosure a happy hunting ground. The more so now, as in all probability the Dockers have never had a better balanced team than the ones which guards the traditions of the old Lions of the South. Fine words and healthy praise, says James Murray, and indeed they are fine words. It's interesting just to read those words. Obviously there's the intermixing of the Dockers and the Lions nickname, but also the reputation of the club, as a place where big names come to meet their downfall. This is 1903 we're talking about, so I'm sometimes weary of this idea that you are a product of where you come from. It puts the individual to one side slightly, but I'm drawn to it as well. So, I like the idea that we are now who we were then. And I think there's something valuable in that. And that sense of, something we've all been complaining about recently is the loss of identity at the club with the style of football that we're playing. That's the essence of who we are. 1903, the Morning Leader paper that I started off with refers to the superior person of football having to accept that at Millwall, the great and the good meet their match. And that's what we all go for. It was there then. I think it's still there now. It just has to come back sometimes. At the conclusion, the Leader reports just after the final whistle went, there was an animated colloquy. Now that's a name I'm gonna have to look up. In fact, I will look it up now. Colloquy, because I'm not. I pride myself on having a reasonable vocabulary, listeners. Colloquy. Let's have a look at colloquy, because it's not one I've heard of before. Conversation, a colloquy, a gathering of discussion of theological questions. So it's a bit of a. He's having a bit of a laugh there, isn't he? There was a reasonable colloquy at the full-time whistle, in which the Preston officials and the referee, at the end of the first half, this is actually, were taking issue with the referee that the third Millwall goal had been scored in added time. The referee, however, Mr. Adams, was quite correct, says the Morning Leader, in standing to his guns. He had given the rival captains notice that stoppages in the game totted up to 2.5 minutes, and it was well within that time when the ball went into the Preston net for the third time. So the colloquy, God, no, I'm going to use that. You're going to hear that again, I don't care. Beautiful report. It's too long to read it all. The Millwall team report at the end: Sutcliffe in goal, Easton and Stourier, Riley, Bell and Morris, Moran, J.H. Gettins, famous name, Hulse, Jones and Watkins, referee Mr. J. Adams. So there we are. Mill progressed in the FA Cup that season. They would meet Everton in the next round, another massive game that we might come back to another day, and would eventually go out of the competition 3-0 in the semi-finals of the 1902-1903 FA Cup. A famous competition, actually, because that was the Derby who beat us in the semi-finals, then met Bury in the final, which was played at the Crystal Palace, the old Crystal Palace ground, which is now roughly on the site of the dilapidated, sadly, the Athletic Stadium. That was the site of the old FA Cup ground. in front of 63,000. Derby would be beaten by 6-0. It remains a record score. I think didn't Manchester City match that in a few years ago? Beat someone 6-0 in the final. But this stood for many, many years as the record FA Cup final score. Bury 6, Derby County 0 on the 18th of April 1903 in front of 63,000 at the Crystal Palace. But yeah, Millwall Athletic will go out to Derby 3-0 in the semi-final. That game played at Villa Park. There we are. So Millwall, that game caught my eye, dear listeners.
Achtung, Millwall.
Now, my original purpose when I do these preview shows is to try and find a matching fixture. So we were actually away to Preston, not at home. There was a home game, so I blew my own rule out the water there, didn't I, listeners? So, any road, I did find originally a fixture, Preston North End 3, Millwall 4. This is dated October the 6th, 1928. Now, as I said earlier on, there aren't that many fixtures between Preston and Millwall. The FA Cup one I've just mentioned. And really, it was only ever when we made it to the second division for a large chunk of our history that we might have a chance of playing Preston, because we were obviously third division south when we entered the Football League, previously Southern League. And Preston were a major name in football. I mean, I suppose you could argue they still are in a sense, but certainly historically, Preston North End were proud Preston, the initial champions, the unbeaten champions of the first Football League when it was formed in 1888. And they remained, I think they won it twice. Let me just check the Preston wiki page for you listeners so my facts are correct. Yeah, they were champions 1888. 89 and again 1889-90, runners up all through the 1890s really, and then they went off the board a little bit when we played them in the FA Cup, the game I just mentioned in 1903. They were not quite the force that they were, but they would make a comeback in the 1950s, runners up in the early 50s in 1957-58, champions of the second division in through 1903-04. They've been champions of every level, fourth, third, second and first division. FA Cup winners 1888, they did the double famously, first double in 1888, 89 and then 1930. So anyway, cut a long story short, Preston were a major name in the game, even as fallen giants, I suppose, through the early years of the 20th century. And the upshot of that is because we played a large chunk of our existence in the third division south, we rarely met them. We did meet them in this particular season. This is 1928, 28-29. And the reason that we were in the second division was we had been promoted the previous year as champions, record-breaking third division south champions in 1927-28. That's another story. I think we've touched on that a few times in our previous shows. But anyway, we're in the second division, and therefore we got to play Preston North End, which is a rare occurrence at that point. We've played them a lot more in recent times than we did at the start of professional football's existence, shall we put it that way. So yeah, this finished up as a 4-3 win for the Lions at Deepdale, played on the 6th of October 1928 in front of 18,556. Report here, match report from the Weekly Dispatch. Millwall forwards seize their chance. Preston 3, Millwall 4. Whilst giving credit to Millwall for opportunism, a bad defence at Preston allowed them to score 4 goals in 16 minutes during the first half. Wadsworth, Koch, Chance and Phillips being left to go through unchallenged. During the remainder of the game, Preston were almost continually storming Harford's goal, Millwall goalkeeper, but only Ward, James and Harrison found a net. The experiment of playing Ward, the regular right half at the centre forward, was successful in that he gave the best exhibition in that position any North Ender has so far put up this season. It seemed that Millwall's second goal, scored by Koch, got the home defence rattled as they thought he was offside, and this temporary lapse, during which huge gaps were left for forwards to run through, cost Preston the game. All their heroic second-half efforts being of no avail. Jack Koch was a fine leader and was well supported. Bryant was a tower of strength at centre-half, and the backs and keeper excelled in their work. For Preston, Reid was always clever, but the wing halves were not up to standards. Now, there's also another report. It's got a really nice little cartoon style drawing of George Chance, which I will stick on the internet when that goes out. Now, just trying to just finding the biography. This is from Neil's Who's Who book, an invaluable resource. Do get it, Mill Who's Who by Neil Fissler. It's a work of some depth. I mean, the amount of work he's put into this is incredible. So Jules Chance, and there's a nice little cartoon. When in the pre-photography era, papers would often produce little cartoons of players, often with like big heads and outsized head and shoulders and small legs and bodies. It was a certain style. So this one is of Jules Chance, which I will stick on the net. Jules Chance was an outside right, played for Millwall from 1925 to 30, 212 games, 33 goals. He was born in a place called Coppice Mears, which I guess is up north somewhere. In 1896, he passed away in Quarrybank in 1952. His career must be Midlands. His career took in Midlands clubs Cradley Heath, Stourbridge, Brierley Hill, Bristol Rovers, Gillingham, then Millwall for £500 in May 1925. Before returning back to Brierley Hill 1930. He made his debut versus Crystal Palace. In 1925, the biography says George was to many of his opponents an elusive outside right who possessed great speed and was at his best when the ground was hard. It allowed him to cut in to shoot either at goal or play into a teammate. He was never present in the Third Division South title in 1926, scoring 6 goals and was a London FA Challenge Cup winner 2 seasons later. His great pal at the club was Archie Gom, who'll go off sea fishing, and they'll go off sea fishing together. George became a licensee and was mine host of the Thorns Inn at Quarrybank after he gave up the game. George Chance. Now, as I say, there is a nice little cartoon of George Chance, which I will stick online. I quite like these. They're like cigarette card style caricatures, and This report is a little bit more balanced. The other one I thought was a little bit Preston-centric. This is from Reynolds newspaper. Millwall winning a remarkable match. For 10 minutes had the better of the game and their forward line showed fine combinations. For this match at Preston, Millwall had an identical team whilst Preston had Ward in the centre. Millwall kicked off, but their opponents were quickly threatening their goal and gave Harford an opportunity for a splendid save. The game proceeded at fast pace, both territories being repeatedly utilised. After some fine work on the left wing, a good opportunity was lost through Reed being offside. Hewitt saved a splendid shot, sent in by Landals. For 10 minutes, Preston had the better of the game, and their forward line showed a fine combination. Hewitt was repeatedly called on to save, which he did so successfully. Mill team that day: George Harford, Richard Hill, Jimmy Pipe, Vince Jones, Bill Bryant, Len Graham, George Chance, we've mentioned already, Jack Landales, Jack Cock, Will Phillips and Harold Wadsworth. That was the Mill side that won well up there at Preston. This was our first season in the second division. We would finish 14th in actual fact in the second division. This would be under Bob Hunter, having been promoted the previous season. Jack Cock would be our standout player for the season, 42 appearances, 25 goals. Next best being Will Phillips, 25 appearances and 12 goals. That's not bad return either. 1 goal every other game. And the Lions would finish, as we've said, in 14th position. Promoted to the first division, Middlesbrough and Grimsby. Relegated back to the third division, Port Vale and Clapton Orient, as they were known at that point. And there we are, Millwall winning the game 4-3. I've picked out George Harford, goalkeeper. Not a name I'd come across very often previously. Born in Woolwich and would in 1902 die in Chorley, 1980. His career taking in Abbey Wood, Dover United, Maidstone, Boston Heath, Erith and Belvedere, Charlton, Bexley and Welling, then Millwall, Luton and Carlisle. George was in a theatre orchestra. This is the bit that caught my eye. George Harford was our goalkeeper. He was in a theatre orchestra before playing in the Football League. He was a custodian with safe hands and a sufficient degree of anticipation. He made 34 appearances in Mill's Third Division South title success in 1928 and won the London Challenge Cup in the same year. But he lost his place to Joe Lansdale the following season after letting a ball go between his legs in an FA Cup tie versus Northampton. After retiring, he worked in a viscous rayon factory in North Wales and passed away in Chorley in 1980. Fascinating. A theatre orchestra playing a musical. I guess a musician turned footballer. Wonderful stories. And then the last one I've picked out here is Jimmy Pipe, a hard-working player, idolised by the Millwall crowd. He was a crowd hero. 218 games between 1926 and 1934. Local boy, Blackheath, died in Uckfield in 1987. Played for Blackheath, Grays, Thurrock, Millwall, London Transport Tramways. Become a tram conductor when he retired. Became a conductor on the tram. There we are. Joinery was his hobby, which he built his own house apparently. This is wonderful stuff. I love these stories about old school players, such a world removed from, modern era. Can you imagine, I don't know, maybe you can imagine Mason Bennett becoming a bus conductor. Maybe you can imagine that, dear listeners. But that's the kind of thing that would happen to players back then. James Pipe became a tram conductor. Now, I had a quick look through the rest of the paper, found a wonderful story. This is this is dated the 6th of October. This is the Daily Mirror, and in amongst the usual kind of stories at the time, there's just this wonderful story, nothing to do with football. Actually, I just thought I'd share it with you because it just caught my eye. This is on page 3 of the Daily Mirror. Back then, the front page was often used for frothy stories with a real meaty news inside, and this story is of a shooting party, sportsmen as they're described here. Getting lost in the Sahara Desert. The headline is "Lost Sportsman Found Demented in the Desert," dated the 6th of October 1928, Daily Mirror. Lost sportsmen found demented in the desert. They were discovered stalking each other with their rifles in an Egyptian cave. Handkerchief signals seen by an RAF plane searching for a lost group of shooters gone out into the desert. Well, they're expecting to shoot in the desert. I don't know. The report says unclothed sufferers of Gehenna Hill removed on stretchers. Must be where they were discovered, Gehenna Hill. Unable to narrate their experiences. In circumstances of drama and tragedy, a party of sportsmen who drove into the desert in a car and became lost were found yesterday near the Fayoum, above the delta of the Nile, River Nile. An RAF aeroplane, one of many which had been searching the desert, saw a man signalling by means of a handkerchief tied to his rifle. He was one of the lost party, which included an official of the Egyptian royal household and an unnamed Italian. The others were found demented in a cave, water loss presumably, and at the moment the airmen entered, they were stalking each other with rifles, taken to trying to shoot each other. The men were taken on stretchers from the cave in Gebel Gehenna, Hell Hill in the local tongue, to an aerodrome. They could give no coherent account of their adventure. So that be a lesson to any of you going out on your clay pigeon shooting. Don't get lost in the desert if you're going to do it. That's my tip. The report continues that up to 12 aeroplanes from the local RAF station have been searching in the desert for this part. They're without water, and this had driven them to the demented state, as described by the Daily Mirror reportage here. Wonderful story, in my opinion. Also, as another, I don't think this will take off, test of television, BBC here, broadcasting pictures, demonstration next week of the Baird apparatus. As the result of a suggestion by the Baird television company that television experiments might take place at BBC stations, an important announcement was made yesterday. After consulting with the Post Office, the BBC stated, with the approval of the Postmaster General, we have required a specific demonstration of the Baird television apparatus. I like saying it that way, not apparatus. Apparatus. Considering experimental transmissions from BBC stations of television. Will it take off? Listeners, what do you think? And finally, last one, Princess Mary has left the Viceregal Lodge in Dublin. This was the era of the Irish Free State, and Princess Mary and Viscount Lascelles left Euston by the express last night for Liverpool and thence Dublin, where they will stay at the Viceregal Lodge. They're still a Governor General. They were there as the wife of the Governor General of what was called the Irish Free State in the aftermath of the Civil War there. There we are, dear listeners. So that's the kinds of things that you're finding in the news at the time of that 4-3 win by Millwall at Preston. I think I've probably run out of notes on that particular fixture. I hope you've enjoyed this double header. Let me know if you do or you don't. It's intended as a little tasty ahead of the trip to Preston North End on the 21st of October. Now then, we did have at the start of today's show our punditgames.co.uk question, the number one football trivia game. Christmas is coming, blah, blah, blah. And the question was, a curly-haired Argentinian flourished when he was given the Newcastle captaincy in 2011-12, guiding the Tsunami to a surprise fifth place finish in the Premier League that season. He was named in the PFA Premier League Team of the Year. Who was that person, dear listeners? That's the question. The answer is Fabrizio Colacini. There we are. I hope you've enjoyed today's edition of Achtung Millwall, intended as a little tasty before the trip to Preston on the 21st. Fingers crossed for 3 points up there. Until the next edition of Achtung Millwall, this is Nick Hart signing out. Arrivederci Millwall. Bye for now.